Welcome to GNANA, the concept-based digital learning. I am Dr.S.Sirisha, lecturer in commerce, working at TSWREIS, Warangal West. Today, I am here to share with you something about an overview of non-performing assets. On the other day, I was just thinking about the impact of COVID-19 on a common man and in turn how it is affecting the economy. When we talk about economy, there are many areas which come into our discussion. But among them, a most important and which is very close to the common man is banks. Almost all the people are related with the banks in some way or the other. So, as a responsible citizen, I thought that we can contribute something to develop the economy. But the question arises here is, in what way? So, here comes into the picture about our today's session, that is NPAs. Because to reduce NPAs, a common man can contribute his share in order to develop the economy. So now, we will see further how it is possible. Before we see that, let us first understand the learning objectives of the session. The first learning objective is to understand about the NPA concept. Next, to know about the classification of NPAs. Then, to study the impact of NPAs on banks and on economy. Last but one, it is to diagnose the causes of NPAs. Last but not the least, to have an idea about what measures government has implemented in order to reduce NPAs. So, now let us start with our first learning objective, that is to understand about the NPA concept. We all know that the bank is a financial institution that accepts the deposits from the public and lends loans to the public. So here it is clear that with whatever fund the bank is dealing with, it is public money. That means it is our money. So here the problem that is faced by the bankers is that people are taking money from the bank, but they are not repaying it. From the banker's point of view, the loan that the bank is giving to people is treated as an asset, because asset means something that earns returns for you. In general also, people very commonly use this word by saying that I have so many assets like land and buildings, vehicles and so on, because in turn these assets earn something to them. In the same manner, loan also earns interest to the bank, because people who are taking money from the bank pays an interest for that. So, it is also treated as an asset. If these assets earn returns to the bank in the form of an interest, then we call it as a performing asset, because the asset is performing its function. What is its function? That is to earn returns to the bank. If any person takes a loan from the bank and if he fails to pay the interest or principal amount, then we say that asset as a non-performing asset, because as we discussed earlier, if the asset earns returns, we say it as a performing asset. But here the asset is not performing its function, that is not earning interest. So we call it as non-performing asset. Here comes the definition of a non-performing asset, that is non-performing asset is a loan or an advance where interest and or installment of principal remain overdue for a period of more than 90 days in respect of a term loan. Okay, I hope now that we fulfill the first learning objective. What is that? That is to understand the concept of NPA. But here a doubt arises. That is it the same for a person who is not paid for 180 days or 360 days or more than that? Because all these days are more than 90 days. Then the answer is no, they are not the same. To know why they are not the same, we will discuss in our second learning objective, that is classification of NPAs. Now, before we proceed into the technicality of classification of NPAs, I would like to share the incident that happened to me at my degree level. Generally, we used to take books from the library, and if we don't return the books within the due date, then our librarian used to charge fine. That is, if we return after 1 day of the due date, then the fine was rupees 10. If it is after 2 days, then it is rupees 20, and so on. Similarly, if a person fails to pay the loan amount, depending upon the period, that is for how many days the loan taker is not paying interest or the principal amount, the extra amount is charged. Similarly, as a penalty amount that is charged to a student in case of returning books lately. So for this purpose, it is necessary to focus on the classification of NPAs. The RBI, that is, the Reserve Bank of India, which is a regulatory body for the banks, says that once the asset reaches to NPA status, depending upon the period, it has to categorize the assets under substandard asset, doubtful asset, and loss assets. Because people who are paying in different times should be treated differently. Now, moving on to the first category, that is substandard assets. What are substandard assets? The assets which remained as an NPA for a period of less than or equal to 12 months is known as substandard assets. Next comes doubtful assets. The name itself says that they are doubtful, and these assets are further classified into D1, D2 and D3. And the last category is loss assets. To be clearer, I will give you a timeline on this. See here, on 27th January 2019, I have taken a loan. Then the due date is on 27th February 2019. And if I fail to pay on the due date, then it becomes overdue from 28th February 2019. Then after 90 days, it becomes NPA. And if this remains for 1 year, then it becomes a substandard. Then after that, again for 1 year, doubtful 1. Then 1 to 3 years, doubtful assets 2. Then more than 3 years, doubtful assets 3. And the last category is loss assets. Loss assets are those assets which have been identified by the internal and external auditors as a bad loan. Now, we will proceed with the third learning objective, that is, to study the impact of NPAs on bank and economy. The first point here we have to discuss from bank point of view. So here, the first one is profitability. Let me explain this point with an example. Assume that you are depositing some money in the bank and the bank in return is paying some interest to you on the amount that you have deposited. Let us think that the interest rate that the bank is giving to you is 4%. Now, As a borrower, I will approach the bank for a loan and the bank will give the loan to me. So, the difference between the interest that the bank is giving to you and the interest that the bank is taking from me is its profit. It is nothing but, technically, we call it as a spread or net interest margin. Now, suppose if I fail to pay the bank the interest of 7%, then from where the bank will get the profit? So here the profit is nil, that is zero. So in this way, if a borrower fails to pay the interest and if the loan becomes NPA, then it definitely affects the profitability of the bank, as we have seen in the above example. The next, it is public confidence. It is the most pulling factor for a bank. Most of the people deposit money in the bank even if the bank deposit interest rates are low, because the people trust banks more than any other investment avenues. And if the bank shows high NPAs, then the public lose their confidence on the banks and they will not deposit the money, and in turn the banks may not be in a position to lend loans to the borrowers, and this may affect the economy. This leads to the third impact, that is credit creation. Due to decrease in deposits, sometimes the banks have to decrease its loan to the public, and this affects the people, maybe businessmen, entrepreneur or an individual. As a result, there may not be any development in the economy, and thus it leads to slowdown of the economy. There is another area where NPA impact is observed, that is liability management. If you remember the example that I gave for profitability, that is depositors earn 4% interest and borrowers pay 7% interest. If there are two depositors, then the bank has to pay 8% interest, that is 4% into 2. And if there are three borrowers, then the bank will get 21% interest, that is 7% into 3. Okay, fine. But this will happen when these three borrowers pay the interest amount. But out of 3, if only one person pays the interest, then the bank will get only 7% interest. Then in such a situation, it is very difficult to the bank to pay to depositors because he is liable to pay them. And here they face liability management problem. So, all these are interrelated, and in order to take care about the NPA's impact on banks and economy, it is necessary to focus and to understand why loans are becoming as NPAs. So here comes our next learning objective, that is to know the causes of NPAs. To focus on the point that why we should know the causes of NPAs, let's understand this example. When you get fever, you'll go to a doctor. Now, there are different types of fevers like normal fever, viral fever, malaria, typhoid, dengue, and so on. So, for all these fevers, the doctor won't prescribe the same medicine. Depending upon the cause of the fever, the doctor prescribes the medicine. In the same manner, by knowing the cause of NPA only, the banker can take necessary action steps to recover the NPAs. In this view, I proceed further with the causes of NPAs. So, the first and the foremost important cause is willful defaulters. Willful defaulters are those people who take loans from the bank with an intention not to pay the loan amount. Generally, people like you and me may not come under this category because the moment we are default of one EMI, the bank people will be back of us and will immediately send the gentle reminder message. Then they will make a call, then they will send a letter, and at last the bank recovery agents will come to our house and ask us to pay the amount. And this will be a very embarrassing situation to a common man. But still, there are some people who are very comfortable at not repaying the loan amount. So, this is one of the reasons for loans becoming NPAs. There may be the other reason like economic crisis. The business people may not have an intention of not paying amount to the banks, but sometimes there may be a slowdown in the economy, due to which the sales have impacted and the profitability has gone down. So the businessman may not be in a position to pay the amount. It may be a genuine cash crunch, but after some time, the NPAs of these industries may become less. That means once the industries come out of the recession, they may clear their loan amount, but still may be one of the causes of an NPA. Coming to the third cause, that is lenient lending norms. Generally, banks will have very strict rules to follow before they lend a loan. But sometimes, before giving a loan, if the credit worthiness of the borrower is not properly analyzed, or the financial status of a business or a person is overestimated, or maybe because of some political pressure that the bank grants a loan, then there is a chance of occurring NPAs. The last but one reason for the NPA is giving loans to vested interested parties. If a banker thinks that a friend in need is a friend indeed, and if he gives a loan to a businessman or a person in which the banker is interested directly or indirectly, then in such situation there is a chance that the loan may turn into NPA. Apart from these reasons, there are some other reasons like natural calamities, which generally affect agricultural loans, some loopholes in our legal system, diversion of funds, credit distribution, mismanagement, and so on. Now, once when we are clear with the causes, let us move on to the remedies that are taken by the government in order to strengthen the banking system by reducing the NPAs. Banking Regulation Act was amended to give more powers to RBI to identify the defaulters and take the necessary actions. For this purpose, the remedial measures are classified into two categories. That is, one is before sanctioning the loan and the other one is after the loan becomes an NPA. Now, first let us throw a light on the first category, that is, before sanctioning a loan, what measures the bank takes. So here is the list. Number 1 is Credit Information Bureau of India Limited, that is CIBIL. Before I explain about CIBIL, I want to ask you one question. That is, how do you know that which movie is good before you watch the movie? Definitely by seeing the ratings. In the same manner, to know about the credit worthiness of the borrowers, the RBI introduced the CIBIL system in the year 2000 and its headquarters is at Mumbai. CIBIL is a computer database company which maintains the details of all credit obtained by commercial and consumer borrowers. By accessing this database, bank can know the credit history of borrower and decides on giving a loan or not. Next, we have PCR, that is Public Credit Register. It is a 360-degree profile of the company. That means, before giving a loan to a company, it will see that the company's performance from all the aspects. Like, it will see the company's share position in the market, debentures position, tax position, goodwill of the company in the market, and these companies has taken loans, how many times, and what is its repayment position, and so on. Therefore, before giving a loan to the businessman, all these things will be checked and then the bank will give the loan. There is another measure, that is CRIL. That means Central Repository of Information on Large Credits. RBI set up CRIL in the year 2014 to collect the data of all borrowers whose credit exposure is of rupees 5 crores and the above. These are all the steps taken by the bank before sanctioning a loan. In spite of taking these steps, if the loan turns into NPAs, then bank will take the following measures. The first one is one-time settlement. In order to create a win-win situation to both borrower and lenders, the banks opt OTS. In one-time settlement, bank negotiates with the borrower to recover maximum possible sum in one go, and bank gives some rebate the borrower in paying the loan amount because the bankers think that today's small amount is better than tomorrow's uncertain amount. It is just like one bird in hand is better than two birds in the bush. Next comes Lok Adalats. To give a legal shape to one-time settlement, government has created Lok Adalats. If OTS is finalized, both banker and borrower appears before Lok Adalat and present their settlement before judge, who puts its official stamp on an agreement, making it a proper court verdict. Maximum jurisdiction that the Lok Adalat handles is up to 20 lakhs, and more than this value, it will be handled by the DRT. So, the next mission is the Debt Recovery Tribunal, that is DRT. This is a special court which is meant only for debt recovery cases. The next is SARFAESI Act. It stands for Securitization and Reconstruction of Financial Assets Enforcement Security Interest Act, which was introduced in the year 2002. The reason why this has been introduced is that the major problem faced earlier in recovery cases was that of taking possession of the assets charged to them through mortgage or hypothecation. To take charge of these assets, bank has to obtain court permission, which is used to take a long period of time. To overcome this problem, government has enacted this SARFAESI Act. This act empowers the bank officers themselves to take the charge on the assets without the intervention of the courts. And this saved a lot of time to to bank officers. Now, we will move on to the next remedy, that is Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, IBC, introduced in the year 2016. Now, what is insolvency? Insolvency means if the borrower fails to pay the amount and says that right now he is unable to pay. So in this case, there is a chance that they may pay in future. But if this continues, then the day comes that they may say that they are not able to pay. So this situation is bankruptcy. This became fashion to some people. They are taking loans from the banks and they are not paying. And the bankers also observe that businesses are in poor condition, but business people are not in poor condition. So it has been decided in this act that the company should be kept for auction. Then it created a fear in the people that they are going to lose their ancestors' business and how it is going to affect their future generation and what about their goodwill in the market. Before this act was introduced, banks used to be back of the defaulters. But now the defaulters are back of the banks, requesting for some period of time to pay the loan. Then comes the next step taken by the government, that is Quizzical Economic Offender. This was introduced in the year 2018. Here also, the company will go for auction. But here not only the Indian property, but also the property that they have in the foreign countries. All these are the measures that the banker is taking at the post-sanction stage of loan. That is, after granting the loan, if that loan becomes an NPA. So, till now, we have seen that the bank is taking measures regarding both sanctioning the loan and after the loan becomes NPA. But recently, when a common man saw a news about NPA, they raised a doubt that why bank is waiting for 90 days? Why don't the bank start its recovery steps when the first installment becomes due? So, here there is a need to focus on the reality. That is, actually, the bankers will start their follow-up as soon as their first installment becomes due. For this, they maintain a separate account known as SMA, that is, Special Maintenance Accounts. These accounts are further classified as SMA1 and SMA2. Now, what is SMA1 and SMA2? Generally, when we take a loan, they have to pay the installment for every 1 month, that is on 30th day. If they fail to pay on the 31st day, the loan is classified as SMA1 and the loan will be in this stage from 31st day to 60th day. Still, if the person fails to pay from 61 days to 90 days, it is treated as SMA2. And these loans are known as stressed assets because it is creating some stress to bankers. So here, as an outsider, a common man thinks that the banker is taking steps only after the loan becomes NPA. But sorry to say that he is wrong. The bankers work very proactively and before the account becomes NPAs at the level of SMA1 only, they start their follow-up and at the level SMA2, they will be more rigid and strict followers. The main purpose why bank has started this classification of SMA1 and SMA2 in the year 2019 is for early recovery and to see that the loan should not turn into NPAs. Now, I would like to conclude this session. But before I conclude, I just want to say that There is no doubt in saying that the government is taking timely actions to recover NPAs. But here, if something is lacking means that is the contribution of common man's share in reducing the NPAs. It is a need of an hour to remember that the asset is becoming non-performing asset because the borrower is failing to pay the loan amount. So, the solution for this is on the shoulders of the borrowers because they only have the capacity to turn this non-performing assets into a performing assets by paying the due amount to the bank. If each borrower feels responsibility of upliftment of the economy on their shoulders, then NPAs will reduce and thus, as a result, the economy develops. Now, before I end the session, I would like to say thanks to all my viewers. Thank you.